Hey, welcome back everyone. In this episode, we're gonna create the base character class that's gonna use the attribute set that we defined in the last episode. However, before we get into that, let's just correct one small mistake I made. Um, I copy and pasted this line of code, but of course, the UGD attribute set base is from the sample project, so we just need to replace that name with the name of our own class. And it should now build. All right, now that that's been taken care of, let's go ahead and create a new C++ class, and it will be of type ability system component, sorry. And we'll call this like character ability system component. We'll put this in public character abilities. Okay. And basically this is gonna be just like a regular ability system component, except we're gonna use it to broadcast whenever this character takes damage. That way other abilities and entities can react to that. And we'll also just keep track of the fact we'll keep track of whether or not we've already applied like startup effects or abilities to the character. Okay, so to do that, we'll create a couple of Boolean um, fields here. So character abilities given, and it'll start off as false. Startup effects applied, also false. We'll also define a new function called receive damage. Takes in source ability system component, how much damage they would have taken, and how much damage they actually took. Okay. And finally, we need to create a a received damage delegate, which is basically kind of like the received damage event that we will like broadcast to whenever this character actually takes damage. So to actually create this delegate, we have to type declare dynamic multicast delegate with 3 params. And first we give it the name, then those parameters, and you have to add commas after each type as well. And just add the semicolon there. Looks good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the header. Now we actually have to create the implementation here. Just copy the name of this class. Void receive damage. And all we're gonna do is actually broadcast to that delegate we made the received damage. Um, where we took like who we took damage from, or like which system component we took damage from. How much damage we would have taken, how much damage we actually took, and yeah, that's pretty much it for that. Okay, next let's create an enum, because I know we'll need this. Let's just call it maybe like demo ability ID. Maps to one of those. And I'll just make these 3 for now. But we might eventually do something like ability 1, ability 2. And I think you could even just, actually give them names like fireball or something like that. But we don't have to decide those for now. And let's also just give these a display name like that. All right, cool. Okay, now that we have this enum, we can actually create our character class. So let's go open up the editor. Okay, let's create a new C++ class. It'll be subclass of a character. Let's just call this demo character base. We'll put this under public character. No, not abilities, just character. Okay. And we're also, oops, we're also going to have this implement the ability system interface, which means we also have to import or include the ability system interface header file. Yep, looks good. Okay, so if you look at this interface, all it really wants is this function right here to be implemented. All right, and it has to return the ability system component to use for this actor, right? So that just means we have to also implement it. All right, but we have to define it a little bit differently. To say like that. So because this function has to return the ability system component that this actor or character is going to use, we actually have to create it first. So let's go under our protected region here. And let's make it. So and this will be the character ability system component we made earlier. And we'll also want to make the attribute set that we made in the last episode. Nope, it was called character attribute set base. Okay, and in this function, we will pretty much just return this component here. But before we get into that, let's just go ahead and add a few more things we need. So first we need to change the constructor to take in an object initializer. That way we can pass in like default values and stuff. Okay. All right, next let's create a new event called onCharacterDied. So just like in the other file we made, I think it was it this one? Here. It'll be similar, except it's just going to take one parameter, and then we're going to call it onCharacterDied. Oh, nope, sorry, onCharacterDied, fCharacterDied delegate, apologies. And the only parameter is going to be our character that died. Okay, so now that that's defined, you know, this is gonna make sense. And we need to add this property here. Let's put this under the category of, I don't know, like demo character, because it's related to our character class. Similarly, blueprint callable, and this will just return whether or not our character is alive. we'll make another function that will get the ability level for any ability that we want. And that's why we made that enum earlier. So we'll take any one of these ability IDs and return like the level that the character has that ability unlocked for. Okay. And finally, we'll have one more function that will only be called by the server called remove character abilities. Next, we need to create a function to actually die and another function to finish dying. Basically, it'll just get called when the character is done dying. So maybe to then let us destroy the actor or something like that. And let's just make that a U function so we can call it from our blueprints. Okay. And finally, we need to create some getters. That way we can access our attributes from our attribute set within blueprints, basically. So U function, print callable, category is going to be demo, character, attribute. And we had health on our attribute set, I believe. We also had max health, and then we do the same for mana. All right, so now we have our getters for our attributes in our attribute set. One last thing before I forget, we have to include the header file that defines this enum. Okay. All right, now let's just create a couple of gameplay tags. This one will basically just say, will indicate if the character's dead. And this one, like the name suggests, will be an effect that will remove the character once they've died. So we would apply it to the character once the character has died and is ready to be removed from the game. Next, we'll want to create a new property. And we'll call it character name. We'll want to make another one for like the death animation. This one we're going to want to actually edit. And the category is going to be animation. We'll also want another U property. It's going to be read only. Under the abilities category, it's going to basically assign or contain the default attributes. Basically it's just going to like initialize the default values of this character's attributes. So like we might want to apply them on respawn or just initial spawn. All right, similarly, we'll want to create another thing for startup effects, because basically these effects will mainly just have to do with like initializing the default or setting default values to the attributes. But these effects might be just any other effects, like maybe you want your character to like glow for a second before, you know, settling down or whatever. Um, So, yep. Oh, and I almost forgot. This is actually going to be an array because we may have multiple effects. We'll also want to, oops. We'll also want to create another function to add the abilities to the character, to initialize the attributes, and to add the startup effects. So basically we'll call these like on spawn or something, and it'll use these properties here to initialize the attribute and add the startup effects. And finally, we'll want to create a couple of setters. So to set the health and mana. Cool. So one thing to note is we're not really going to use these other than in special cases like in spawning or respawning. If you want to modify health or mana, like I said earlier, you're going to want to use a gameplay effect, okay? And uh, when initializing attributes, it's going to have to run on the server, but we can also run it on the client because like replication won't matter too much since it'll be the same values, okay? One thing to note too is that this is not an array of attributes, I mean of gameplay effects, whereas this one is, and that's mainly because you can have one effect that'll just set all of these attributes, but you can have different effects on here that do a variety of things. So if you're wondering, that's why. Um, I know I didn't really explain effects yet that much. We'll dive into those in a later episode once we actually make our own effects. But yeah, basically all they do is like modify attributes. And you can also attach like visual effects, or they're called cues. Uh, Cues are anything that like isn't really crucial to gameplay. Like it's either like visual effects, animations, or sound effects or something like that. And we can attach those cues to gameplay effects. So for example, if an enemy is stunned, we can attach a like a stun animation or like icon to that effect. That way, whenever the stun effect is applied, they'll have that little icon above their head. Um, okay, another thing I like to talk about are these gameplay tags. Like the name describes, basically a tag is some sort of name that you can put onto an object that will describe the state of the object. So, for example, if a character is stunned, it might have a tag like this, state.debuff.stun. Um, Objects can have multiple tags, of course, and you can basically create these rules for abilities uh, that largely depend on tags. So for example, you can set an ability to be canceled by another tag, or an ability can't be activated if you have a certain tag. So in this case, right, if you have the tag stun, then you shouldn't be able to cast any spell, right? So that's like one example of it, I guess. And a gameplay effect, like I already said, basically can also manipulate these tags to control the state of a character. So to actually get this to compile, would need to import another header file called gameplay tag container.h. And I also noticed that we have two public regions here, so let's just cut this, delete that, and paste everything we just cut up here. And yeah, I think that should be everything for this header file. Okay, now let's go ahead and write the definitions for these. So first let's start the constructor. That, okay. we would like to first create the tags. We'll just call that state.dead. And the other tag we made was called effect remove on death tag. And we'll make that effect dot remove on death. Cool. We also want to set be always relevant to true, and basically set the collision response, set collision response to channel All right. This means that we also need to include the components slash capsule component dot h header. There we go. Oops, we also need e collision channel. Sorry about that. All right, cool. Next up, we will implement the get ability system component, this one. Just copy that over, paste it over here. And it's just going to return ability system component dot get. Because remember, that is going to return this here. Okay. Next, we'll implement, where is it? Is alive. And that's just going to return whether or not our health is greater than 0. Okay. Similarly for this one. For now, let's just hard code everything to have an ability level of 1. But, you know, later on you might want to create some sort of system that helps you keep track of all of your abilities and like the level that you have unlocked for them. Maybe in a different like tutorial series, or maybe in this one I'll go over how to do that. Okay. Oh, we need to get rid of this. Now let's implement the remove character abilities. Okay. So first off, if the local role is not equal to role of authority, which means if you don't own this character, we're not going to want to, you know, touch this character's abilities, right? Or if the ability system component is not valid. Oh, I can't type today. Oh, and also let's just do that. That way it stops complaining. Okay. And finally, if the ability system component has not given the character its abilities yet, then let's just return because we have no abilities to remove. We also need to change this to U character ability system component and U character attribute set because I forgot that it added that U there. I think we also need to move this down because it doesn't like when you have the generated headers above the other imports. So anyway, let's go back here and continue working on the remove character abilities function. Let's create an array of F gameplay ability spec handles. Call it abilities to remove. Now we're going to loop through every single gameplay ability spec in the abilities system. Component dot get get activatable. How do you say that word? There we go. And we'll want to make sure that we're basically only removing the abilities that we like started with, because we might have other abilities like still active on us potentially while we're dying, because we would presumably call this function on death. Like it's just going to remove everything from the character when they die. Okay, and now we're gonna just add spec.handle. And a handle, like a spec handle, is kind of like an instance of the ability. We haven't made this class yet, which we will right after we finish writing this function. But yeah, it'll just kind of keep track of things related to our abilities. But let's just, for now, loop through all of the abilities to remove. And we'll just do clear ability. Sure. Oh, it's just that. And then finally, we're just going to set the ability system component that abilities given equals false, because we're basically going to call this function once the player or the character dies, and then if they're going to get respawn, this needs to be set back to false, that way they can get their abilities back. Alright, so now let's just go ahead and add the include statement for the abilities. No, what is it? Character abilities system component. That should take care of these warnings. And this is gonna be a list of abilities that the character has. I forgot to include it in the header file, so just go ahead and add it. So let me see. Here, go ahead and make a new property. It's going to be an array of U gameplay ability. Well, U character gameplay ability, we'll call it. And like we said earlier, it'll just be called character abilities. All right, cool. Now the thing is, we also haven't made this class yet. We'll work on that next. So just bear with me here. So we can at least stop complaining. I opened up the editor, and now let's just create the classes that we're missing. So we have, what do we call it? U character gameplay ability. Oh, and it's going to be of type gameplay ability. Okay, and we'll call it U character gameplay ability. Oh, I think it adds the U by itself. And we'll put that under public character abilities. Okay. Okay, let's go back to our editor here, and we'll come back to this character ability class. For now, let's just keep writing the character base class. Okay. So the next function we're going to implement is, where were we? Let's do get character. Oh, sorry, get health. Those are easy. Basically, we're going to want to make sure that the attribute set is valid. And if it is, we'll return the health value. Otherwise, I guess just return 0. You could also just like throw an error or something that says the attribute set is invalid or something like that. And then we'll do the same thing for get mana. Okay. Okay, I think that means we also need to import the attribute set. Cool. Let's just go ahead and make the basically same functions, but for the max, because I think we had those definitions as well. Let's just check. Yep. So get max mana and get max health. Okay, cool. Another easy one we can get out of the way is the die function. Basically, it'll just destroy its, the actor. This is just a simple destroy function call. Actually, that'll probably be when we're done dying, because maybe we want to do something else when we're dying. The die function is gonna basically just do like all the setup before we want to destroy the character. So for example, remove all the abilities, kind of just like reset everything in case we want to respawn. So we'll call the remove character abilities function we made. I'm gonna get the capsule component and disable collisions. Just like that. Probably also disable gravity. And set velocity to 0. Okay, up next we will want to broadcast that we died. Okay, and then that should, yep, link to that. And if the ability system component is valid, then we'll want to cancel all abilities. We'll also want to add the effect to remove on death tag. And we'll also want to count how many effects we've removed. Oops. And finally, we're going to add the gameplay tag of death, or dead, sorry. After that, we'll want to play the death animation. Otherwise, just like finish dying. Cool. Oops, also forgot. There we go. And yeah, by the way, if you're wondering why I just leave some of these warnings alone or like I ignore them, it's mainly because I can't tell if the ID is just really slow and just hasn't updated until like I compile or something. So that's why I'm a little slow to catch some of these things. Like for example, here it's saying death montage is undefined, but it's defined in the header file here. So hopefully, yeah, once we compile everything, it just works. Okay, now let's go ahead and add the add character abilities function we defined here. Okay, so first, similar to what we did before removing them, just copy that because the same rules apply. Basically, we don't want to add abilities to this character if we don't own the character, if the ability component is not valid, or if we already have given the character its abilities, right? Now we'll just iterate through every single gameplay ability. What do we call it? U character gameplay ability. Call it startup ability in the array of character abilities. And oh, okay. We're going to actually give the ability to our ability system component. And this is another thing we haven't made yet. The EF gameplay ability spec. It's kind of like an instance of the ability. So we'll come back to this as well. Oh, actually, no, I guess we have made it. Never mind. Like it already exists. Sorry, I'm getting a little mixed up. But yeah, just bear with me here. Hopefully, once we just get past all of this setup, we can actually start making some cool abilities. But for now, yep, we just need to pass in the level. Oh man, okay. So that's all that just to basically add the ability to the system component. Okay. Finally, I'm going to set this to true because we finally added the abilities to the character. Oops, sorry, one quick fix here. Need to spell that correctly, and let's get ability level. Yep. Forgot the parentheses here. Okay, cool. I think we also need to import the ability header file. Okay. All right, next up, we'll want to create the function to initialize the attributes. So basically, if the ability system component is not valid, just return. Otherwise, if the default attributes array, or not array, but pointer does not exist, then yeah, let's just log. Because we want to basically log this to make sure people know that they need to fill out the blueprint. Because without the default attributes, we're not going to know, what how to initialize this character. All right, and then we'll return. Finally, we'll context handle, and we'll set that equal to a new one. Okay, and then we're going to add a source and set that equal to this. Oh, I cannot type today, jeez. Okay, finally, we're going to make a new handle. Jeez. Oh. So normally we would have a function to get the character level, but let's just let's just hard code this to 1 for now. Add. Actually, might as well just implement it really quickly. So if we go to our base set here, let's just make a new attribute. Call this level. Just like that. Same stuff as all the other ones. Oops. This is old level, sorry. Just trying to do this quickly. So that's all done. And then if we go to the actual implementation. Wow, my IntelliSense is very slow. Just gonna copy. Oh, just do that. Copy that over. Cool, cool, cool. And finally, set that. Cool. So now that we added level to our character attribute set, we need to call get character level, which is another function we haven't implemented. but it's gonna go up here with the other getters we made. Get character level, and we'll just call get level. And let's go back to the header file and define this real fast. Wow, this is so slow. Where did we make the headers? Here. Cool. So now that we have this function available to us, we just call it here. Pass in the effect context we made. And there we go, we have a new handle. Now we want to make sure that the handle is valid. And then we want to apply the game effect. So it's going to be we're going to pass in the new handle we made. Then the ability system component. There we go. Now, thing is, where is it? I messed up here. Sorry about that. So, oh, never mind. We're good. Yeah, so that is basically just creating a new effect context, which is essentially just like a place to put the effects, right? And then you're going to create the actual effect spec. Because remember, a spec is essentially kind of like the instance of the effect, right? Now that we have a valid one, and it's going to be an instance of this default attributes effect that we stored earlier, right? Make sure that's valid, and then this is actually going to apply the spec to our ability system component. Okay. Okay. Now let's create the add startup effects class function. Sorry. Okay. So first, we're gonna want to do similar checks to like we've done before, right? We're gonna make sure we have authority, that the ability component is valid, and that the startup effects haven't been applied. Next, kind of like how we initialize the attributes, we're going to create a new effect context. Okay. Now we're going to want to loop through every single effect. Call that gameplay effect. And the startup effects. Sorry. Startup effects array that we made earlier. And like we did here, we're going to create like a new spec, but instead of the default attributes effect, it's going to be, the current one in the array. And yeah, everything else is the same. And then finally, we are going to set the startup effects applied equal to true. Okay, all we have left are these setters here. So let's just copy these two. You just put them here, I guess. Oops. Okay. And like we've done before, we have to first make sure the attribute set is valid. And if it is, we actually set health equal to whatever we pass in. Same with the mana. Oh wait, sorry. I really can't type. We have to do that. Yep, that looks good. And I guess now we try and compile, see what happens. Okay, so I got this error here. I think we just need to get rid of the S. Let's try again. Okay, we also need to get rid of this function. Can also get rid of the onTick function. And let's change this to capital C character. Else mana. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. Oops, I almost forgot this too. And let's try again. Okay, sorry. I did mess up by calling these U properties when they're very clearly functions. So sorry about that. And let's try again. Did I do that anywhere else? Looks like I also misspelled U proper T. Yeah, sorry guys. I don't know why. I just really can't type today. Here we go. Oh, another silly mistake. Just forgot another one of these. And finally, just delete that. Alright, one last thing we need to do is go back to our implementation. Wow, that is so slow. Okay, in our constructor, we need to call the constructor of, one sec. I think we would make our own movement class, but for now, let's just say it's going to be a subclass of view character movement component. And let's just copy or include game framework character component.h. And that should solve the errors with the get movement. Yep. And finally, it's saying ability ID does not exist. So let's see what that's about. Yeah, so the ability ID stuff doesn't exist mainly because we haven't actually finished or created, I should say, the class for the U character gameplay ability. So this class is actually going to have that information. I think I might as well just do it in this video, I guess, so we can at least finish off with a compiled, you know, solution. So we need a constructor. We're gonna need another U property blueprint, read only, edit anywhere, category ability, and it's going to be demo, what do we call it? Demo ability ID, ability, okay. And we'll just have that be none for now. And the reason we're calling this ability input ID is because this ability will basically activate whenever the input is pressed. We also need another way to reference the ability without it automatically triggering like when you hit the input key. For example, like passive abilities, they won't necessarily like activate when you hit a key, but you still want to have a reference to the ability. Okay, we'll want another property, but this one will be read and write, and it'll just be whether or not we should activate the ability when you are granted it. Okay, so this will be useful for when, say for example, you want to knock someone back. How you would do that is grant the target an ability that knocks them back and then set this to true. That way it automatically knocks them back whenever they are assigned the ability. And then it would like ungrant them the ability once it's like been activated or something like that. So another thing we need is on avatar set. Okay. And basically, if an ability is marked as activate ability on granted, you want to activate them immediately when given here. So basically, like once this gets called, once you're granted the ability, right? So like on avatar set, that makes sense, right? Like when you're setting, um, you know, this ability on avatar. So once this gets called, you check this boolean, and if it's true, then we activate the ability. So let's go ahead and create the implementation for that. Let's go to it. Okay. We'll just call the super version of it. And then if activate ability on granted, then we're gonna, we don't really need to do this. We can just do active info, ability, system component, try activate ability, spec dot handle, false. We also need to include our ability system component. And we need to make the constructor. First, let's just fix that. Character, abilities, there we go. Finally, we want to change the instancing policy to be eGameplay ability instancing policy since per actor. So that'll be the new default. And activation block tags.add tag. Okay, so what this is doing is basically default all abilities to be blocked by the state of being dead or being stunned, which obviously is what we want because we don't want any ability to actually be able to activate whenever you're dead or stunned. We could still override this though, I guess if we wanted to. But yeah, that would just be like the default. Okay, now let's just go back to this file and include our demo.h. Wait, I guess I have to do that. It's just for consistency, I guess. Oh, wait, let me just move this up. Okay, now that it's successfully compiled, let's just go back here, fix this typo, and let's just look for all instances where I'm making or trying to get a tag because we need to actually define these tags in the engine itself. So let's see. Oh, let's say, I think I just called all of them state dot something. So these are the only tags we have, I guess. Dead, debuff, remove on death. All right. So let's open up our editor, go to edit, project settings, then search for tag, and here we can add our tags. So we had state.dead, state.debuff.stun, and we have state.remove on death. Cool. And yeah, just as a side note, the tags are hierarchical, however you say that word. So yeah, they're in a hierarchy. So if you do parent.child1.child2, that's how it'll work. Okay, and you have to remove these manually. So, oh, that worked. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Now that those are declared, we should be able to run our solution. Ah, great. Looks like everything is working as before, which means we're doing good.